Hello everybody. Today we watched the new Martin Scorsese movie, Killers of the Flower Moon, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Robert De Niro, and a myriad of other famous actors and actors from the Native American community. So Aiden, what's the plot of Killers of the Flower Moon?
Killers of the Flower Moon follows a grand conspiracy orchestrated by Robert De Niro's character, Bill, who is attempting to marry off his nephew to one of the Osage tribeswomen after the Osage found oil on their land, which has made them all extremely wealthy, and also the extension of that plot to kill off all of her relatives so that they can maximize the amount of money they gain. Also, it's a true story. This happened in real life, so it's not really spoilers. Connor, what do you think of Killers of the Flower Moon?
I thought Killers of the Flower Moon was very good. I watched the trailer and I was excited. And the trailer did a good job of illustrating pretty much everything from what we're going to get to the sound design.
Yep.
Sound design, cinematography, story. And what we have is a movie about a relatively small community that is helped by who they believe to be a generous benefactor in Bill. But he's ultimately pretty money hungry.
Yeah.
Doing things like trying to collect insurance on people he's had killed. Wait, you already said the plot. Why did I just say the plot again?
I don't know.
Oh,
You gave a more detailed version, but
cut all that out.
Anyway, what did you think of Killers of the Flower Moon?
I zoned out. I've been up for a long time. I thought it was really good. Like I said, the trailer, like I was trying to say before I got into a second plot synopsis for some reason, is that the trailer kind of, it's a good trailer. It's a really good mood trailer. So watch the trailer if you haven't. It's not like one of those Marvel trailers nowadays where it just kind of gives away key moments of key action scenes that you're going to see and moments that would otherwise be exciting. It's not one of those trailers. There are definitely moments in the trailers, but you kind of understand the vibe of the movie. You understand the worlds through the trailer, and you understand the amazing sound design throughout. The movie is brilliantly... the sound design is brilliant in Killers of the Flower Moon, with amazing music in the background that's booming and keeps up a fast energy, keeps you going with the 4-hour plot. When the music goes away, you typically know it's a more serious moment or intense moment. Like, they masterfully did the sound editing. I know I don't talk about sound editing much, but it's something that actually really stands out in this movie. The performances were all really good from all the characters, or all the actors. Even these actors that don't get much work because they're Native American, and unfortunately, Native American people don't get many roles, but considering probably the relatively small talent pool that they had to work with there, they managed to find dozens of supporting actors to take over all these roles, and it rarely felt awkward. There were a couple of moments where the acting wasn't the best. No one from the principal cast really. Some of the supporting was a little sketchy.
Yeah.
But it was mostly really good, and even so, you're looking at a huge movie with a relatively limited talent pool, and it never took me out of the film. The cinematography's great, and even though it's, you kind of get the geography of this relatively small town over the 3.5 hours in the surrounding area, which is really cool. You really start to feel like you actually know the place well, which, geography in film isn't always the greatest, but since Martin Scorsese was working with a relatively small area, and working with a pretty large cast, it was important to kind of understand the geography of the film especially with numerous small time jumps throughout. I don't know exactly how many years the film goes over. Probably around like, I'd say like 10 or something, 10-ish
Yeah,
years.
probably about that, because
Because they don't have the kids at first, and then about an hour in, they have the kids. By the end, the kids are kind of not. They're still kids, but they're not young as
8
young.
to 10 years, something like that.
Yeah, and it's it helps you understand the timeline. The murders are paced out at a good rate, and they feel really cold. There's nothing dramatic about them, which I think plays to the favor of perhaps how fickle life is. Kind of tries to add an impact to it.
Yeah, they're very kind of raw and muted, and people just die really fast, and that's all there is to it.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, there's a lot of great characters in the film. Lots of great nuances in the performance. I like the movie, much like Oppenheimer. I complained about Oppenheimer's court scenes at the end as being kind of boring, and that's why I said Oppenheimer was too long. I didn't have that problem with this because I feel like I connected more with the characters for whatever reason than Oppenheimer. And I did praise the dialogue and stuff in Oppenheimer, but in the courtroom scene, you're looking around at all these characters you recognize. Maybe they've had 5 or 6 minutes of screen time, but a lot of them have had impact, and now they're sitting in the background.
Yep.
You cannot feel their anger. You can understand why. And it's also more of a personal story. You understand why Leonardo DiCaprio has hard decisions. You feel for him when he's in the court stuff, but you also kind of find him to be a despicable piece of shit because of what he did. And you also balance, each character's motivation in those points. And it's really powerful. It's a really powerful character drama that's really fun to sit with, And I'm not always a huge fan of long movies. My motto is usually 60 or 90 minutes is the best. But that's usually like dumb Marvel movies where characters don't matter. But this movie's trying to juggle key moments with about 40 characters. And also people come in through the story and it's like, oh, it's that guy,
Yeah.
It was like watching a Marvel movie,
Fat Damon rolls in with the FBI. And
Fat Damon shows up. You got Brendan Fraser, John Lithgow.
John Lithgow.
Lots of known actors pop up.
Yeah, lots of
to support.
Lots of those middle tier actors, those C-listers pop up.
Yeah, a lot of
but good.
But a lot of good actors.
That's not the. Yeah, I mean, being a
wanted to
C-lister
work-
doesn't mean you're a bad actor.
No, just random good actors that wanted to work with Marty for a little bit, lending their talents to minimal roles. Yeah, and it's one of those movies where every character, even the side characters, are pretty memorable. At least I didn't have a hard time remembering oh, that was that guy an hour ago that had this happen to him and popped up for this reason because whatever. And you start to understand the politics of this town. Bill kind of puts on a fatherly role for the town, in that he created a lot of the modern infrastructure. And you have a point in the movie where they say the white man brought the money. We didn't really have this type of hierarchy or societal system until they showed up. So you almost have this man who helped modernize these people and make their lives or not modernize, but I suppose English, Europeanize their way of life. And you have, he kind of brings this, he helps them establish this way of life, and then he kind of starts exploiting it. And when he sees Molly and Ernest's relationship come up, it kind of makes for a new money-making opportunity for him. And even though he knew most of the people who he murdered since they were kids, since this is a relatively small town. For example, Henry, who used to date Molly, or was her first husband, he was friends with Henry, gets him killed. The guy who ends up killing Henry befriended Henry and felt really bad about it. So you see some remorse, but you also see some politics from the time. Obviously, especially towards the early 1900s, Native Americans lost most of their power.
Yeah.
So, and minorities in general in America at that time
You also
were
have
very
a lot
dehumanized.
a lot of people who live in the town who aren't the Osage are really desperate people to come out to the middle of nowhere and work as taxi drivers and oil field workers for.
Right.
So you have a bunch of people who will do anything for money because they're desperate and out in the middle of nowhere, and
So, I mean,
it snowballs into this.
Bill was a pioneer in setting up an economy for this system, and he learns to exploit it and tries to exploit it at any turn, not really caring what the human consequence of it is. And Ernest is perhaps naive. He does love his wife, but he also has an aspect where he doesn't really see people. You know, he also kind of devalues human life. Part of that might be because he's a soldier, but you even get the aspect that he doesn't necessarily respect the Native American people as much, not at first at least, which is why he gets into this plan, and once he starts, then he kind of gets steamrolled by Bill and exploited, since he's not a very smart man, and he already kind of started what he did. So yeah, no, there's a lot of interesting character stuff in there, and all the stories are really enthralling. I wish Molly was in it more, because I thought her character was really interesting. I understand why she wasn't, because in real life, for half the story, she had horrible diabetic episodes and
was being poisoned
slowly by Bill and Ernest. So, yeah, I mean, I understand why she wasn't in more of the movie, but I would have liked to see her more, because I thought her character was interesting. And, yeah, but they still gave her moments to have moments of grief about her family and friends who are slowly being picked off one by one in new and bizarre ways. And you also understand that what's happening to this community is kind of outside their normal grasp. At one point, one of the tribal leaders says, 20 years ago I was fighting in a war and I always knew who my enemy was. So this kind of sly, backhanded political murder system that Bill brought to town made it so it kind of confused these people into not suspecting Bill. I guess it's a criticism I saw, because sometimes when I really like a movie, I read the I read the lowest to highest ranked reviews on Letterboxd to see what the people are saying. I like to see the counterpoints. Sometimes it's valid. Most of the people didn't understand the movie.
Some of them seemingly did not watch the
Some of the people seemingly didn't watch the movie. Some of the people didn't understand the movie. A big criticism is that the movie was 3.5 hours long. And it's like, this is a pretty big story.
I mean, it's effectively 3 movies.
There's 3 different plots in the film. There's the murders.
Well, like every act is like.
Well, really, yeah. Movie. I mean, there's like the setup and the murders, which
the
is
murders and the plot, and then there's the investigation and the FBI, and then there's a courtroom drama. It's a trilogy of movies played back to back to back.
Essentially, yeah. But some people didn't get it, and
yeah.
I had an overarching point that I was gonna make. But I forgot, and people are dumb. But this is a really good movie, yeah. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Um, and there's been a lot of movies I've really enjoyed this year, but in terms of character dramas, this is probably my favorite because it's a really good character drama. Martin Scorsese definitely used his clout and the fact that Apple TV wasn't gonna say no to him, and the fact that he had major stars and Paramount was willing to send it to theaters, help Apple send it to theaters. He essentially got Apple to open their checkbook and say, "Do whatever, Marty," and then Paramount's
And
like, "Well, it's done, and somebody's gonna put it out, if not us." So it allowed for Martin Scorsese to make a really solid 3.5 hour movie that he was able to get put into theaters without much fingers in the pot stirring the vision. It's one of the most impressive movies by a filmmaker of Martin Scorsese's age. I think Joe Biden proves to us Americans that you can still be successful at 80. And so does Martin Scorsese. So Aiden, what did you think of Killers of the Flower Moon?
It's great. It's real good. I like. There's a lot of things I like. There's a lot to like. Pretty much everything really, but a couple things to highlight. I like that the whole movie is kind of just like this big, out of control spiral where it starts with like, you could marry that girl, and eventually you'll get money, and it's like, oh, one of the girls died, and now the guy's hopping to the other one, and then they kill one person because he's snooping around, and then that leads to having to kill 2 more loose ends, and it just spirals out of control into this huge mess. It's very chaotic, and even though the movie's generally kind of slow, not slow in a bad way, but it's just like, it's not an action movie. It really keeps the pace up, that it's kind of just this ever-expanding chaos, just mess. I also really like Ernest and Molly's relationship. I can't speak to what it was like in real life, but they have a very cute dynamic and clearly care for each other a lot. But then, Ernest is like a kind of an idiot and gets sucked into this whole thing. And as it keeps getting worse and worse, he's dragged into it more and more. Not to say he's not he does some bad things on his own and he's pretty greedy, but
he's definitely complacent in the whole thing.
He also, I think the movie establishes that they have like a real relationship, even though he also has to just play along with this insanity because he's sucked into it. The relationship is really sweet at times, and even when it's like at its lowest, I think that helps tie the movie together really well. Beautifully shot as always, fantastic soundtrack. Pretty much everyone is great in this. Side characters, main characters. There's a couple people who, but for the most part, hard to complain about everyone. I love the structure where it's just like this chaotic murder fest at the start, and then the focus shifts into the investigation, and the investigation leads to this whole scramble to tie up every loose end while the detectives and the FBI are roaming around, and the big finale with the courts and everything, and Ernest's conflict over having to come clean and sentence himself and everyone else to jail. It's got a little bit of that Martin Scorsese dark humor mixed in there, but generally it's very, very serious and dour and depressing, very respectful of the Osage people. It's brilliant, it's gorgeous. I don't have a lot to add on top of that, but it's fantastic. So Connor, would you recommend Killers of the Flower Moon?
Yeah, I'd recommend it. I think it's really good. I guess don't go to it if you don't like 3.5 hour movies. because it is long as fuck. So you kind of need an attention span. And that's not even a knock on people, but if you like go to movies for like fun escapism and aren't really into like serious character dramas, then this won't be for you. The end of the movie is depressing.
A lot of the movies.
And then, well, the whole fucking movie is really depressing. But then they get to the end, and it's like, well, first off, like the president blows off
he sent
Molly.
One FBI guy.
No, the reason he did that was because in the next scene, the chief guy says, "We paid $30,000 so that they would send an FBI guy out here." So they kind of like did it for the photo op, and then the guy like slipped him $30K and was like, "Hey, can you send out one of our dudes, your dudes or something?" And then by the time everyone was tried, no one actually really went to jail for that long. It's just like, you're guilty, but whatever.
Yep, pretty much everyone just got out and went back to what they were doing.
Nothing really happened. Nothing was really solved. I mean, the mystery is solved. Like, everybody found out. Not that it's a mystery to you. But it's a really depressing movie. If you're into movies purely for, like, fun escapism, I guess I wouldn't recommend it to you. But if you're into, like, character dramas and don't mind a longer movie, definitely go to it. It's a great movie. If you have, like, bowel issues, maybe see it at home, because I had to pee like 3 times and I have to like go over. Thankfully the movie's kind of slow, so you can leave for like 10 minutes and, you know, while you're missing some good performances and some nuances, maybe 1 or 2 side characters that have something interesting to say.
You're not going to be lost.
It's not movie busting to go and take a piss real quick at the movie theater, like it is for some movies where it's just such a fast-paced movie that you can't miss anything. But even though it has a glacial pace, it's really good, and I love it. It was awesome. One of my favorites of the year. So Aiden, would you recommend Killers of the Flower Moon?
Yep, easy recommend. It's difficult and challenging and depressing and kind of miserable, but in all the good ways. If you're not a big movie person, if you're a cape shitter, I mean, you could go and try to challenge yourself, but I think you're going to write a 5-star review on Letterboxd where you call it boring and then give The Flash a 4.5. But yeah, it's fantastic. I would absolutely recommend it to people who are into movies and not just like cape shit.
Absolutely.
Catch us next time for...
I think Five Nights at Freddy's.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
FNAF is next week. I don't think anything else comes out next week.
I think so.
What's that movie? The next movie we're gonna watch, Paul Giamatti, The Holdovers.
Oh, yeah.
That was supposed to come out next week, but that's just a limited release, and Minnesota gets it the following week. At least all the pre-order times are for November 7th, even though it officially comes out on the 26th, but in limited markets.
I can't believe the Rhino is starring in his own movie.
Yeah, maybe this movie will get so much acclaim that Marvel hits him up. Brings him back into the fold.
Go back as the weird robot Rhino that's in 2 seconds of Amazing Spider-Man 2, but in
I can't think of any like Rhino rip-off characters from DC off the top of my head, but there has to be some equivalent characters to the Rhino.
I mean, Amazing
DC.
Spider-Man 2 is just a guy in a robot suit.
No, I'm saying like you just put. I mean, like maybe James Gunn and
I think Paul Giamatti
and Marvel will get in a
Luthor.
bidding. They'll get in a bidding war.
Paul Giamatti is Lex
No, it's
Luthor.
funnier if he's a character like similar to the Rhino, because the Lex Luthor's smart. The Rhino's like a dumb guy who becomes a Rhino. But then in the movies, they thought that was ridiculous. They put him in a giant metal robot suit. Why wasn't Paul Giamatti as the Rhino in Spider-Man Far From No Way Home? He didn't get his whole movie just because he was only teased in an end credit stinger. Presumably, Andrew Garfield went on to fight Paul Giamatti's Rhino. So why wasn't he in No Way Home?
I don't know.
That would have been fan service.
The other thing is,
I
know we've
I
complained
cried
about
when
No
Tobey
Way Home.
Maguire came out. I would literally bawl and piss myself.
I
if
know
Paul
we've complained
Giamatti
about
came
No
out
Way
as Iron Man.
Home, but it's kind of weird that, like, when they're talking to the new Spider-Man, Spider-Man's like, yeah, I went to space and fought aliens and this and that and fought Thanos, and the other ones are like, oh yeah, we just fought the two guys who were in our movies, and then that was it. We never saw anyone again. We just hung out and stopped people from snatching purses. It's like the Amazing Spider-Man universe had
Amazing Spider-Man, he said, I got vengeful. I'm not going to be specific what characters I got vengeful against. Because that would be... because those characters could potentially show up in future installments. It would have been... and it would be kind of a plot hole if we didn't mention... If I mentioned him,
okay, but
and he
Tobey
showed up
Maguire,
in your installment, because then you would know.
Tobey Maguire specifically is like, yeah, after I fought Venom and Sandman, there was just no more supervillains, so I've just been doing nothing for like 25 years. I've just been sitting on buildings, jacking off.
Yeah, I mean, he said all he needed to say about Spider-Man 3. It was a wild, 5 years.
There was a
in the
5
city
year
of New
span
York.
where everyone got horrific superpowers and tried to destroy New York.
Yes.
And then after that, it just kind of dried up.
For Andrew Garfield, it was
bubble,
2 years.
The bubble popped.
The bubble popped, and then Andrew Garfield, it was a trend for just 2 years, like fidget spinners, and then it went away. Everybody kind of stopped caring about doing that, and then he was vengeful.
He presumably killed Chad Kroger off screen.
I like to think that's what he meant by I got vengeful, is that he went and he, in the unproduced Amazing Spider-Man 3, found Chad Kroger, found his dad alive and said, "You're my daddy." And then he said, "I have to do something because I'm so vengeful." And then he killed Chad Kroger. And then he jacked off on buildings for 10 years until fucking Tom Holland came a knocking.
Anyway. Bye.
Killers of the Flower Moon Multiverse Adventures? Possibly?
The old guy who walked out of the theater behind me and said, "Do you think there's a post-credit scene?"
Dude,
bro,
maybe Marty's gonna make Killers of the Flower Moon too.
Bro, everyone's dead at the end of the movie. Movie literally ends with, yeah, Molly died of fucking diabetes when she was fucking 50. And everyone else just lived in a trailer for the rest of their lives. And died eventually.